All instrumental music requires a player who has to decide how the music should be played, and in the first video I gave some examples of different approaches to these Bach pieces. We're going on in a moment to the first sonata, but I'd like to explain one particular reason for these different approaches, one which you could say divides the players into two camps, maybe an oversimplification, but quite a useful one, and that is the question of HIP, which is historically informed performance. And this is not a mere academic matter. The fact is that when Joseph Joachim took up this music in the 19th century, he largely established a tradition, he and Ferdinand David just before him, he largely established a tradition which was based on nothing really except the notes in front of him. There was no 18th century performing tradition because these sonatas and partitas were, we think, very seldom performed. So nothing had been handed down. So Joachim's approach was basically a romantic approach, romantic with a capital R, because after all he inhabited the world of Schumann, Mendelssohn, Brahms, Bruch, Dvorak. And since his time, and this established a tradition of its kind, which went on right through last century and still persists. But scholars more recently, in about the last 60 years, have looked carefully into written records of Bach's time, published and unpublished, and they have arrived at new editions which are probably a bit closer to what Bach actually expected and what he would himself have heard in his own time. So, you have recordings which follow the 19th century approach, the Joachim and onwards approach, and others which hark right back to 1720 when the music was written. You have players who use violins set up with modern strings and bows, and you have others who use Baroque instruments or copies of Baroque instruments with gut strings, bows which are a little different in design, and internal acoustic differences as well. And you have players who tune to modern pitch and players who tune a little bit lower, because it's known that the pitch has risen since 1720 somewhat. And the differences to the listener are significant. You're more aware of them the more you get to know the music. But the music is strong and it can take either approach. I'm not expressing a preference for either, and you'll hear examples of both. Bearing that in mind, on to the music. We'll start with the opening movement of the first sonata, a profound solemn adagio in G minor. I think I've got the music here. Yes, I have. I can show you what it looks like. It looks pretty intricate. Here it is. Lots of black notes, huh? And this is what it sounds like in a performance recorded recently, and very well played, but one which is in more the 19th century tradition than the earlier. I'd like to make one point about that movement. 70 or 80 years before the arrival of sonata form, it seems to bear characteristics of that very important structure. There's an opening statement, an exposition if you like. It settles on an end point, which is an octave D held for quite a long time, then goes forward into an almost improvisatory section linked to that statement, which is a little like a development in sonata form, which culminates in a big held chord. Then there's a pause, a slight pause, and what follows mirrors the opening statement, though it's far from being exact repetition. The passage work is different, but you'll certainly hear phrases which are almost identical, if perhaps in different keys. And this last section, or second last section, has the character of the sonatas form recapitulation. And then the music culminates in a big build-up towards a big G minor chord, the same chord as at the very beginning, and that could be said to be the coda. Now you can hear this in a different, historically informed performance, though it's not on a Baroque violin. This is actually on a violin set up in a modern way, though I'm sure it's an 18th century instrument. But it's set up as a modern violin, but it follows the Baroque style faithfully, and I shall mark the beginning of the development, as I'm calling it, that way, and the beginning of the recapitulation that way, just to indicate what I was talking about. Here we go. Well, there are quite a few differences. The chords are played in a different way, approached in a different way. The second player doesn't use vibrato much of at all. The first player quite a lot expressively. I think it's fair to say that the first version is bolder, and you could say more extrovert than the second. The second, perhaps more reflective, more thoughtful. It makes the music sound sadder, I think. But anyway, there you are. The second movement of the first sonata is a fugue, and the third a most beautiful Siciliano, a slow lyrical movement in 12/8 time. Then, to end the sonata, we have this, which comes as a bit of a surprise perhaps for us now. One of the pleasures of preparing these videos has been listening to many examples of playing like that. Absolutely magnificent playing. Several of the sonatas have movements, and partitas have movements like that. Very fast, very exciting movements. Very difficult to play. Well, the first partita is unlike any of the other works in this group. Indeed, unlike the other two partitas. It opens with a spiky allemande, a German dance which can be quick or slow. Here it is slow. 7 other movements follow, 8 altogether, and they're in pairs. Every second movement, that is to say the 2nd, 4th, 6th and 8th obviously, is a variation on its preceding movement. And the variation movements are all headed double, D-O-U-B-L-E. The tempo di Borea, which is really a bourrée, which you heard in the first video, played by Joseph Joachim, is the 7th of the 8 movements. But we're going to hear now the 5th and the 6th. That is to say, a sarabande, a slow, elegant, stately movement, and its double, its variation. Here they are. And there we end our second video, and the third one will deal with the second sonata, the sonata in E minor.